now I'd like to introduce Pastor Jim Lafferty, who is going to open the event with a healing prayer for all of us.
Thank you. Welcome you here to Saturday Mennonite Church. And so I'd ask that you just join me now and pray. Lord, you've been called Jehovah Rapha, which means the God that heals. And you've been called that in the scriptures, and we ask you to not only heal our bodies, but also our minds, our souls, our emotions, and our hearts. We thank you that you have chosen to use your great strength and your compassion and your love to minister to us. And we recognize that healing is just as much waiting on you and trusting you as it is us being open to receiving what you have to give to us. And we thank you for the healing that will come today. Maybe it will be a healing to our spirits, where we will leave this place lifted up, encouraged, knowing that we're not alone, knowing that there are others walking with us. Or maybe it will be a healing that will happen as we learn better how to take care of ourselves and how to be able to cope with the condition that we have. We thank you so much that we can be here together in this place to learn, to grow. And we pray especially, too, for the caregivers, that you would be with each one of those family members who's walking alongside a loved one, that you would give them extra grace and patience and kindness, and also to know what they can and cannot do. We thank you that you are a God who has offered us hope, and we want to open our eyes right now to receive what you have for us today. We thank you for your presence that's here with us. We pray this all in the name of Christ.
I'd also like to introduce Kathy from Hope Over Pain and have her speak about their organization and their numerous projects that are upcoming.
I wish I would have known. Hi, good morning, welcome, and thank you for coming. Hope Over Pain is exactly what it sounds like, hope. We all need hope with this disease. And our charity organization is founded by all volunteers, they're all RSD-CRPSers, and our mission is to create awareness, to get the public and the media aware of this life-altering disease. That's mission number one. Mission number two is research. We need to get research, not just have tools surgical tools, which are great, but they don't work for everybody. Medication, which is great, but it doesn't work for everybody. There's a lot going on in Europe right now, and I'd like to see more of what's happening in Europe happen in the States. We need to get out there and fight, and that's our job. That's what we're here for. And we're also here, one of the main objectives is to help people that have fallen through the cracks. And when I say that, I mean people that don't live in an urban area have a tendency not to have access to good doctors, to doctors that understand RSD. I mean, how many people have gone to the ER and they don't know what it is? Too many medical professionals don't know what this disease is. So that's another thing. I think, to be honest with you, awareness, research, and helping, and hope. We do have hope. Take one small thing that happened to you during the day that was good, and that's your hope. Because the next day, you could have two small things that happen. All of our group is all volunteers. We have many projects coming up. On our desk, you will see, besides our remembrance bracelets in all different colors, we put together a cookbook. And it's all done, again, by CRPSers who they're caretakers, or they had done recipes that anybody can cook. And they're done for our benefit and for the caretaker's benefit. So they're short, they're easy, they're simple, and they're here to help. And again, all of our funds, we're a nonprofit, none of us make a penny. all volunteers. Every single penny that comes into this charity goes back out. And I just want you guys to know that. We're working on special walkathons. We're working on this huge event in April where we're going to have a big conference and hopefully get quite a few people. And I'm looking towards the medical profession because sometimes they scare the hell out of me. And I can say that. The medical profession, I was stunned when I was diagnosed how many people have no clue what this disease is, what it can do to you. How many people on the street, people look at me and say, hey, you look fine. You know, you don't look sick. They don't see the scars on my back from all the surgeries I've had. They don't see me laying in bed with my feet the size of footballs and swollen purple. And it's creating an awareness. We want to get to the media. I want to get this to everybody. If I could find a like Jake Fox, I'd get him or her, but we can't. So the best thing we can do is take people like me, people like you, get all together, and we're going to do this together. It's our fight, and we're going to win it. Thank you.
And now I would like to introduce Dr. Getson.
I think this thing's working, right? Okay, great. Small group, I can stand here and do this. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. Normally, when I talk to groups of people about what I'm going to call reflex sympathetic dystrophy, because that's what it is to me, despite the complex regional pain syndrome thing. The people that I'm talking to are physicians and nurses, and they are people who have some kind of fundamental knowledge of what the disease is purported to be, and they read about it and they saw a couple of cases and maybe they treated a few of those people, and they really have no recognition or realization for what the people on the other side of the room are feeling. So I brought no PowerPoint, because if I put the PowerPoint from my perspective up, you would see the signs and symptoms, but you could look in the mirror or at the person sitting next to you, and all the other things that really didn't seem to be appropriate for this group. So I'm going to do what I did back in June in Allentown, and I'm just going to talk. And at the end of the time when I get tired of talking, or whenever the sun sets, whichever comes first, we'll take a break, stretch ourselves. Liesha will talk to you about what you see up there in terms of complementary and dietary approaches, and then we'll take some questions and we'll answer whatever questions you have. Now, I never read anything, but I'm going to break from tradition just for 3 sentences. The wonderful Neil Donald Walsh, who many you may or may not know wrote Conversations with God, was talking about the relationship of spirituality and people. And I'm going to borrow half of what he said for the beginning of this talk and talk about this. There are people in this world who don't know that they don't know. And he calls them the innocents, and that's fine for me. And then he says there are people who don't know, but they know that they don't know. And he says they're willing, and you should teach them. And that really is the folks here, and a lot of the people and doctors and nurses that I talk to. And the third group that he talks to is the group that say they don't know, but they think that they know. And he calls them dangerous and says to avoid them. I call them referring doctors. And they're the people that you have seen. They are the people that comprise the 4.3 doctors that the RSD Association of America says the average RSD patient sees before they find one who can make a diagnosis. So my goal over the past couple of years, and what will continue to be my goal, is to go out and educate those doctors who don't know but think that they know, and try and teach them what it is that they really don't know, and make them aware of the fact that they don't know. And I think one of the things that has to happen here with this effort of people in trying to beat the disease and trying to educate is to try and say to people, if you have these symptoms, you need to find somebody who recognizes that these symptoms are either one of two things. My son-in-law is an orthopedic surgeon, and the piece of information that I gave him is when you see somebody like this in your office, get it out of your office, because you don't know what to do. And he recognizes and acknowledges that he doesn't know what to do with this disease. And so he's doing the patient a great service by not trying to treat the patient. Where we get into trouble is when people go to doctors and they say, I know what's wrong with you, and they do this, and they do this, and they do this, and they do this, and eventually time transpires, and it's a year, or it's 18 months, and now they say, well, you know what, all the tests are normal, or they're inconclusive, so therefore, either you're crazy, or, okay, I don't know what's wrong with you, which is really rare in the medical community, or there's nothing I can do to help you. And so you've now spent a finite amount of time, from a day to a year and a half or 2 years, trying to get better from something that you know that you have, but the person sitting opposite you in the white coat doesn't know and isn't doing you the right service. Now, I am primarily in family practice, at least I used to be. And my mandate 35 years ago when I started was one of two things: get you better or get you to somebody who can make you better. It's really my only job. If you come in with a skin rash, I probably don't have any idea what it is, but I know a good dermatologist down the hall. So my job is to get you there, and if I do that, I've done you as much of a service as if I had fixed you, for the simple reason that I ultimately did, although secondhand. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to educate the medical profession to understand, either know it and learn it, or know who to send somebody to. Now, to that end, former Governor Corzine in New Jersey signed into law something called the RSD Awareness Bill. There's actually one in Pennsylvania, too. And I would venture to guess that either most, if not all of you, don't even know that it exists, and it doesn't do anything. It just sits there. It's on the books. If you go into the Pennsylvania legislature, there is something called the RSD Awareness Bill in the state of New Jersey. It doesn't do anything. There's an RSD Awareness Bill in the state of New Jersey that's going to do something, because we are going to go out with mandated current Governor Christie. We're going to go out and we're going to do educational seminars throughout the state of New Jersey. We're going to go out and we're going to do them free. We're going to go out and we're going to do them for doctors and healthcare professionals and anybody who wants to come to listen, so that people, and by the way, there's going to be a hotline through the State Department of Health and Human Services website, so that somebody can log on and see what the signs and symptoms of the disease are. Because people come to you and they have clear, now this is not an easy disease, understand that. Case in point, here's why it is an easy disease. A lady gets sent to me 5 or 6 years ago. This much in the way of medical records from 8 or 10 doctors, and I always review medical records before I see people, and I go through and it's clear what's wrong with the woman, and the medical records are all over there, and she comes in and she sits down in front of me, and she's sitting there, and I'm doing my examination, I'm sitting on a stool close up to her, and I have my little percussion hammer out to tap her as gently on the knees as I can possibly do, and all of a sudden I notice that there's a drop of water on her pant leg. So I look up at the ceiling, it's not leaking. I go back down to her, and there's a second drop of water. I look up at the ceiling again, and it's still not leaking. And then I look at her face, and one side of her face is blood red, and there's water literally running off the side of her face. And the other side of her face is stone dry. And then it was like somebody drew a line right down the center of her. They said, does this happen often? She said, this happened for like a year and a half. And nobody said anything. Well, they just told me my lymphatic system. You don't get those kind of patients very often, so I took these records and I sort of handed them back to her and I said, well, let's go ahead and treat your reflex sympathetic dystrophy. Unfortunately, it's not always that easy. It's not always that easy when somebody comes in and the limbs are purple and the hair is not growing and the nails are dysfunctional and they're sensitive to touch and they can't stand the cold weather, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not always that easy. But it is easy if you spend your life and your time looking at all the nuances of the disease. It's easy. It's what I do. It's what a bunch of people do. It's what a bunch of people understand. And so what we're going to try and do is to educate. As I said, we're going to have videos that we're going to put online. I have a couple of videos that are already online from lectures that I gave. There's going to be 2 more going to be online, so that not so much you need to look at them, because you know this stuff. You're here. Okay? You need to get your doctors to look at this stuff. You need to get your next door neighbor to look at this this stuff. You need to get the doctor who happens to be somebody that your cousin plays cards with, who has a patient that you know is afflicted with the disorder but has not been recognized as being afflicted with it. So this is where the educational, this is where you help yourselves as a unit. And you help yourselves by getting the word out. Now, I can get the word out to 20, 30, 40 people, but if those 20, 30, 40 people tell another 20, 30, 40 people, and another 30, and another, you're going to have hundreds, and then we have thousands. And eventually, with enough persistence, somebody's going to know somebody who knows somebody, and we're going to get the Dr. Oz. Well, the bad news, we've tried. This is a piece of information that you may want to know. The day before he started his television show, which is, I think, now 2 years, I could be wrong, but there were 1,000 emails the day before sent to his email. Do you have an idea for a show? 1,000 emails on a mass mailing from RSD patients saying, please do a show on RSD. 1,000. 2 years later, still hasn't done one. He did a show on chronic pain, but he hasn't done an RSD show. So the problem is that we have to keep pushing it. As soon as we get that kind of exposure, as soon as we get that kind of national presence, we don't have Jerry Lewis, we don't have Michael J. Fox. The closest that we got to this was Paul Abdul, and I don't think that counted. Although I heard an interesting thing the other day. Michael Jackson apparently had reflex sympathetic dystrophy. They were interviewing one of his siblings who was talking about the reason that he was taking all this medication to sleep and for pain. And when you listen to the litany of symptoms that he was treating, it's clear that he had at least some kind of sympathetic dysfunction, which led to the medicine, which ultimately led to his death. And again, I don't know how much good Michael Jackson would have done as kind of a moot point in not being around anymore, but we need some kind of national presence who can come out and say, this is what I have. I don't look like I have anything, but this is what I have, and we need to get awareness. And when that happens, and it will eventually happen because somebody's out there with this disorder, then it will take a giant leap and a giant step forward. Right now, it really is one step at a time. It will take a giant leap when we get a spokesperson, whoever that might be. So, what I really want to do today is talk about not so much the stuff that you know, but maybe some of the stuff that you don't. And you may know. And some of you may have been in Allentown back in June when I was rambling around the room for about an hour and a half or 2 hours talking about things. If you get onto the RSD website talks about the signs and symptoms of the disease: color change, temperature change, swelling, pain, hair growth, temperature growth, all those things that you've seen so many, many times. I want to talk about two things. Number one, the criteria that says no other diagnosis best fits the disease complex. You see, in medicine, what you have is doctors going in and saying, I know what's wrong with you. It's a course that you take in your first year of medical school. I know what's wrong with you. In point of fact, what most of us do in medicine is we work backwards. Sometimes it's easy. Mother brings a child in, child has a bunch of white dots, they're itchy, the next door neighbor said chicken pox, the two kids were playing together. That's easy. Strep throat, there's things that are easy, but a lot of diagnoses are really not easy, so we work backwards. And how do we do that? Well, the mind and the thought process is this. It isn't this, it isn't this, it isn't this, it isn't this, it isn't this. So now you've eliminated. It's what in medicine they call rule out. It's what I call work backwards. And I tell people sometimes if they come in, pick a number between 1 and 5. You have one chance in 5 or 20% of getting it right. But if I tell you it's not 1, 2, or 3, I've just increased your odds to 50%. So this is what we're doing as physicians, although we're not admitting to it. This is what we're doing. We're saying it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. And the RSD Association of America, about 4 or 5 years ago, put a criteria that says no other disease process best fits. No other diagnosis best fits, whichever way you look at it. And so what happens is when somebody comes in with a constellation of symptoms, one of the things that we're doing is saying nothing else works. This is the only diagnosis that works. So it must be right because it's the only one that fits. And to me, that really should be the first diagnosis, because not everybody has swelling, and not everybody has pain, and not everybody has hair growth changes and hair growth changes and so on and so forth. But if you have a whole bunch of things that fit together, then that's what it really is, and that's the way it needs to be looked at. Now, unfortunately, medical education does not allow for an RSD block. Okay. Most people don't even know where it belongs. Is this neurology? Is this pain management? Is this family practice? Is this physical medicine and rehabilitation? What is it? The answer is everything. It really is. The people who should be educated are the primary care physicians. because they're the ones that see it first. They're the ones that have to say what I said to you earlier. I'm not sure what's wrong with you, but I got an idea. Go see this person. And they're not being educated. There's nothing in the family practice criteria that I've ever been able to find more than maybe an hour. I do a 1-hour lecture here at the Osteopathic College in Philadelphia to second-year medical students, and I'm sure that 90 or 95% of them forget all about it. And I try and explain to them, this is the only exposure you're going to get. Pay attention, because somewhere down the line you're going to save somebody's life by early detection and diagnosis. Be that as it may, no other diagnosis best fits the symptom complex. Best fits the criteria, number one. Okay? Number two, you don't have to have all that stuff. You don't have to have those things to have this diagnosis. You have to have some of them. Some cases say you have to have one of them. And if that one is pain, let's talk about pain for a minute. Pain is an all-encompassing term. It's like saying car. If I tell you that I bought a car and we're having a dialogue, the question is, okay, what kind of car did you buy? Well, I bought a Ford. Well, what kind of Ford did you buy? Well, I bought an Explorer. What color was the Explorer? And you go down that whole list of things to find out exactly what it is that's sitting in my front yard. Pain is the same way. All pain is not the same. Lady walked into my office one day with pain. She was taking 12 Percocet a day. Okay? Sometimes 3 and 4 at a time to get rid of her pain. And it was doing a wonderful job taking the pain away, but she had these horrible, horrible headaches. She said, no matter how much Percocet I take, it doesn't take my headache away. So my answer was, it's fine, you keep doing it, but I walked into the other room, I brought back a sample of Furacet, I gave her the sample of Furacet, I said, I want you to take this, I'll be back in 20 minutes. I walked back in 20 minutes, she's got a big Cheshire cat grin on her face, she's smiling, she has no headache. One pill. What did you give me? Magic. Okay, no, I gave you a pill for your head pain. Because not all pain is pain. In this disease, there's 4 pains. There's inflammatory pain. This is an inflammatory disease, but we'll talk about that later. There's inflammatory pain. That's the pain that's in your knees. It's the pain that's in your ankles. It's the pain that's in your shoulders and your wrists. It's arthritic, if you will, kind of pain. It's inflammatory pain, and it does very well with anti-inflammation treatment. Whether that's diet, whether it's mineral, whether it's turmeric, whether it's whatever you happen to do, it works very well for this. So you have that pain. Then you have muscle pain. And everybody understands muscle pain because at one point in time or another, we've all had muscle pain. Okay. I don't care if you're the most normal person in the world, went out and shoveled snow on your back hurt. Muscle pain. You ran a little farther than you should, you twisted this, you did that. Muscle pain. Muscle pain responds to muscle treatment. Okay. And then you have RSD pain. And the RSD pain is the burning. It's the deep bone pain. It's that pain that responds to RSD treatment, whether they're neuropathic agents or whatever it happens to be. It's a very specific pain. And then you have pain that just happens to be pain. And that's really where you should be treating the pain. The point is that if you treat inflammation as it is, if you treat muscle as it is, if you treat neuropathic as it is, the whole constellation of pain drops dramatically. So instead of taking 12 Percocet, of which it turned out 9 or 10 of them a day the lady was taking for her headache, she was treating her headaches with a pain pill. And so she's all narcotic up, and isn't working anyhow. Ultimately, we degrade our occipital nerve blocks on her. She had no head pain and she took no medicine, but that's another story altogether. The point at hand is, if we're going to talk about pain as being the hallmark of this disease, please understand that not all pain is the same. So you need to step back when you get pain, or if you're with somebody, because you need to step back and say, let's take an analysis of what the pain is. What does it feel like? Is it muscle pain? Is it inflammation pain? Is it bone pain? Is it, what is it? Somebody have a drill bit in your leg. I mean, what does it happen to be? And then analyze and deal with that particular portion of the pain. I'm going to ramble. I mentioned greater occipital nerve blocks. 90% of people come into my office with this disease and tell me they have migraines. They have migraines. 90. And of that 90, 80 of them have occipital neuralgia. Now, the occipital nerves sit right at the base of the hairline in the male. There's a ridge at the back of your head. There's a bump at the back of your head. And if you go underneath it, there's a notch. And if somebody walks into my office and they have a migraine, I walk around and I put my hand on the occipital nerves and I said, this is hurt. And then I scrape them off the ceiling and put them back on the table. And they say, well, yeah, and if you block the occipital nerves, the headaches go away for months at a time. Months at a time. And I found something really neat and novel. I used to give conventional blocks. I used to use Novocaine and cortisone to block the people. Now, if anybody's had Novocaine and cortisone injected, you know that it burns and it hurts. So one day, I took a course from a company called Heal, which is a homeopathic company, and they said, use the homeopathic agents, and they work really good. And I said, okay. So I took 2 of my most difficult female patients, one of whom's an attorney, and one of whom is just plain difficult. And I said, I want to do this. I'm not going to charge you anything. We use this homeopathic stuff. Perfectly safe. It's all natural. Can't hurt you. I want you to tell me what happens. I'm going to give you these blocks. I went in and I blocked the 2 of them within 2 or 3 days. 7, 8, 9 months later, both of them had no pain still. So I stopped using Novocaine and cortisone because in addition to the fact that it wasn't working as long and it hurt, the other stuff works better. And it's safe, so for some reason I just don't get it right. I can go back and do it a second time without it. And the amazing thing is, the wonderfully amazing thing is, that while the insurance industry doesn't like paying for anything that doesn't fall within specific guidelines, there was an article in the front of one of the journals, Pain Practitioner or something like that, about using homeopathic agents for injections. Cover of the journal. You know, more and more and more are being used. And the insurance industry started to come around a little bit, and this week I got my very first check for the injection of homeopathic agents into somebody. And it was a little bit different. I have a woman who's a spinal cord stimulator, and we were able, through other means, to make most of her pain go away, but she has pain from the stimulator site itself. And she's got the box, and she's got these incisions. So what I did was, I made pretty much a smiley face of injections, and then the following month I did the upside down smiley face. And it's taken 5 sets of injections, but I've taken all the pain away from the box without any conventional drug agents. And this pain, which was a source of pain that was affecting the rest of the body being gone, her overall pain level has dropped dramatically. So I use this as kind of a segue into really part of where I want to be today, and part of where Liesha will be later, which is this. I'm a conventionally trained osteopathic medical physician. I went to medical school at the Osteopathic College in Philadelphia, and 35 years later I'm still doing some conventional stuff. But the medical model in this country is wrong, and anybody who doesn't believe in that is not paying attention. The medical model in this country is wonderful for acute medicine. If you come into my office with strep throat, well, I got just the right drug to make you better. There's no question about it. I give you some penicillin or something like that, in 4 or 5 days, your strep throat's gone. Of course, I'm creating GI problems by not giving you a probiotic, but I don't want to get off the track. Acute care medicine works great. You got earache, I can take care of that. You know, even if you're in congestive heart failure, I can take care of that. The problem is that if you come back 2 weeks from now with strep throat, and 2 weeks later with strep throat, and 2 weeks later with strep throat, I'm not doing something right. Okay? And you're not doing something right if you've been in my office 4 times with strep throat in 8 weeks. The point at hand is that becomes a different story. So the first time is easy, but when it starts being second, third, and fourth, what are we missing? What are we not seeing? What's going on with that individual that makes it necessary for them to keep coming back every 2 weeks with strep throat? And to that end, we segue into chronic conditions, whether the chronic condition is diabetes, hypertension, or neurologic problems such as reflex sympathetic dystrophy, and say, wait a minute, our model is not set up for that. Percocet and Neurontin and Celebrex are not set up for that. Those drugs were never intended to treat people for the long term. It's not what they're there for. They're there for acute stuff. I had my appendix taken out. I needed Percocet for a day or 2 because the pain was severe. That was what the model was set up for. But what happened was the pharmaceutical company, which was pretty much like saying, here's the fire, so let me just dump about 3 gallons of gasoline on it and watch what happens to the fire. The pharmaceutical companies took over. And so they make lots and lots of money treating things long-term that really were intended for short-term use. Because there's a better way. And this is what I have learned, or we have learned more accurately, over the past few months. Years, we have learned that there is a better way. We have learned, as you will hear later, that adjusting your diet makes a difference. We have learned that certain vitamins make a difference. We have learned, for example, that turmeric, which in India is a staple of their diet, reduces inflammation better than Celebrex and naproxen and Aleve and ibuprofen and all that. And it's safe. And it's cheap. But we're not set up in this country for that. So what we're trying to do in my office, and what the idea is to find a better way. To find a way to say, look, I understand what's wrong with you. And I know what has to be done. And I'm going to do this short term. But I want to do this long term. Now, there's an inherent problem with that. The inherent problem with that is that the insurance industry in this country doesn't pay for this. They'll pay for all the penicillin you want to take, but they're not going to pay for the turmeric. And I just used those two as examples. They'll pay for you to come in and have an infusion of ketamine, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, but they won't pay for you to come in and have hyperbaric oxygen treatment. So you have to ask yourself, what's wrong with this picture? There's got to be something wrong with this picture, and what's wrong with this picture is global. I mean, if we got into talking about the healthcare system in this country, which we're not going to do, but if we did that, it would be a lecture unto itself. And I will just give you one quote. I've been listening to Andrew Weil, and Andrew Weil, who I'm sure you all heard of, Andrew Weil said that the World Health Organization ranked the United States 37th in the world in healthcare outcomes. Okay. 36th was Somalia. I don't really need to say anymore if you have that piece of information. But we spend more money on healthcare in this country than any other country in the world. So obviously we're doing something wrong. But it's going to take people like you and people like us going forth and saying we need to find a better way, getting funding and financing from wherever we can from independent sources, going out and lecturing, writing papers, and talking about the other way. I'm trying to do a pilot study on hyperbaric oxygen. The hyperbaric people were presented with a proposal which they unspeakably decided to decline because I believe, for example, that hyperbaric oxygen will help. And we can prove it, and we can document it. But there's no funding for that. If I wanted to use Lyrica, for lack of a better word, I'm not picking on anybody, if I wanted to use Lyrica, I could probably get funding from Pfizer to do a study. But I'm not going to get funding over here, and we're back to that dichotomy between what is accepted in this country and what is not. So, with all these things and the rambling that I'm doing, what I want to say to you is this. When a patient walks into my office, the first question is go on, because I've already looked at the medical records. So I already know where that person has been. I already know what that person has done. I already know what medicines they've taken, what tests they've had, and so on and so forth. So I'm ahead of the curve, because I'm the 4.3 doctor, except that I've already got the benefit of all these people did or did not do to move forward. And they've already had a certain number of medicines, a certain number of treatments, a certain number of this, a certain number of that, so it allows me to do other things. But what are conventional treatments for this disease? Well, first and foremost, you've got to keep people mobile. Now, mobilization really depends upon your ability to mobilize. I mean, you may not be able to walk on a treadmill or ride a stationary bike, okay, but there are things that you can do. You've got to keep the joints mobile, because if you don't keep the joints mobile, and remember the spine is a joint, if you don't keep the joints mobile, then things freeze up. I tell you this, if I take a normal person, put them in a sling, and let them walk around for 30 days without taking the arm out of the sling, the elbow will not straighten and the shoulder will not move, because joints are self-lubricated. And what that means is if you don't move it, you lose it. What keeps that joint moving and what keeps that arm going up and down is the fact that when you do it, the joint lubricates itself. So if I stop the self-lubrication, you get a frozen shoulder. So a person who gets an upper limb RSD and says, I can't do this because it hurts, I can only do this, eventually will only be able to do this. And then you'll have a second problem, which is an anatomic structural problem in the shoulder, which wasn't there before. You created that from disuse. So you've got to keep people mobile to the degree that they can be mobilized. Physical therapists do a wonderful job if they understand the disease. Going to a physical therapist who treats 3 or 4 RSD people in their lifetime is like coming into an office of a primary care physician who's never seen an RSD case and saying, make me better. It's not going to happen. So people who go to physical therapy from my office go for an evaluation, and then we have a dialogue. Tell me what you know. Tell me how many people you've treated. Tell me what your treatment plan is. I'm not a physical therapist, but I know what I don't want you doing. So, mobilization, number 1. Number 2, conventionally, and we're going to talk about both, conventionally, medication as necessary for conditions. Short term. Short term. You have muscle spasm, take a muscle relaxant. Okay? Conventionally, you have inflammation, take something for inflammation. That inflammation may be Advil or Aleve over here, it may be turmeric over there, but it's still the same thing. Treat the problems. Number 3, conventionally, interventional stuff. Sympathetic nerve blocks, hospital-based infusions, spinal cord stimulators. Okay? All this conventional stuff that's being out there, and I almost never ever do injections anymore in the office. They don't work. Where they work is if you get somebody who fell down the steps 3 days ago and stretched something out, you can put a halt to that sympathetic dysfunction while you were doing other things. But I almost never see anybody who's been afflicted for 3 or 4 days. I see them 3 or 4 years down the line. But yeah, they'll work there. But these people, a minute lady had 111 stellate ganglion blocks. 111 blocks into the side of her neck. And the first thing that I said to her was, what? And the second thing I said is, I'm sorry I wasn't your pain doctor. Because realistically, I mean, she would go get it, you know, I'm going on vacation for a couple of days, I'll go up a block. You know, I have to go to a meeting tonight, I may not be able to sit, I'll go up a block. And there was a guy that was just 111 times serious. Sometimes you have people who you really are getting better and some mishap occurs and you want to turn it around. So in those instances, especially since the people that I work with use only Novocaine without the steroids, which again isn't great, sometimes we're doing this. But understand that this global idea of doing lots of blocks or this global idea of doing other things really is passé at this point in time because it really doesn't work. Another thing is the use of stimulators. I don't know if anybody in the room has a stimulator, but the use of stimulators is great if you have one limb. If somebody walks in and says to me, my arm is a mess, my hand is like this, I can't use it, the rest of my body's fine, you fix my arm, I'm going back to work, then we're going to talk about putting a stimulator in. Because those people respond very well. The problem is that most people don't have one limb disease because this disease travels. And there's really only one article that was written in Pain, in the journal called Pain in January of 2001, about the spread of this disease, documented spread up to 8 years following the initial trauma. 8 years. So the problem is that a lot of people are getting stimulators, and what happens is 6 months or a year later, they got symptoms in another limb, so now they got another stimulator. That's a second surgery, 4 incisions, and neither one is working. So the things that we're learning now about what we did 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 8 years ago are, they don't work, at least not for the long run. And it brings to bear the question, and the purpose of me being here today, us being here today, is if they don't work, what are you going to do? But the better question is if they don't work, why don't they work? You know, what's going on that we're missing? What are we doing wrong here? That these things are not going to hang myself. That these things don't work. And the answer has to be we're missing something someplace. Now, for the very longest time, I've had this philosophy about fixing things in order. This was even before the concept of understanding what I didn't understand. And that was this. If you take a car, and I know almost nothing about cars, if you take a car and you let 8 or 10 pounds of air out of one tire, but you don't let the owner or the driver know that you've done this, and they're oblivious to the fact that you've done this, and you drive that car for a period of time, the car will go out of alignment. I don't think anybody's going to argue that point. One tire is low, the car will go out of alignment. And so you take the car to a place where they realign the wheels. But if you don't put air back in the tire, the car will go back out of alignment. And no matter how many times you align the car, it will continue to go back out of alignment because you haven't fixed the reason that's going out of alignment. And I suspect, looking at this disease now, being smarter than I was a year and 5 years ago, that the problem is that I can bring you in, I can do a block, or I can bring you in and I can do a stimulator, I can bring you in, I can do, and make you better in a short-term situation, but you're going to go back to where you were. And the reason is because we never really solved the problem of why is it there in the first place. Now, if you talk to 50 experts in this disease, you will get 50 different opinions, and 50 smart people will tell you that they're not really sure who gets this disease and why. You put two people in an automobile of the same age, the same basic body build, etc., and you rear-end their car, one gets it, one doesn't. Why? I don't know. Okay. I'll give you another situation. I have a family where 3 generations that have this disease. Grandparent, parent, child. 3 separate traumas, okay? Genetics? I think so. Why? What's the gene? Nobody's found it yet, but it's there. Okay? Why is it that despite the statistics that you see in the journals, about 80% of the patients with this disease are female? And I'm sorry, but for today's purposes, we are not going to buy the story, which is women handle the pain better than men, which the fact that it's true, notwithstanding, that's not the reason that women get this. 80% are women. Hormonal? Probably. Which hormones? I don't know. But I know there's something to this. And so the point is that we're so concerned about trying to treat the pain of this disease that we're really not looking to where the disease is coming from. Now, I know some of the folks here want to know about what went on in Santa Fe, New Mexico, back in, I guess it was October. There was an RSD conference back in October in Santa Fe, and it was a conference it was educational. It wasn't therapeutic. It wasn't mostly doctors. It was mostly PhDs and people who were doing research in labs to try and find out how the glial cells in the brain and the nervous system work and migrate and what they do. The purpose being that if you can figure out the migration of glial cells, the shift of glial cells, what glial cells do, it gives you a clue as to tracing back as to what we can do with this disease and maybe ultimately what the etiology of the disease is. It was fascinating. It was very, very high-tech stuff. Most of the stuff was done on rat models. And it was the kind of thing that if you're not a PhD who does that kind of stuff, and I'm not a PhD who does that kind of stuff, it was way out there. I mean, it was way out there kind of stuff. There were very few lectures or comments that were clinically based. So what they are doing, just to answer the question as to what went on in a very high-tech fashion, is all over the country, and in fact now all over the world, they are doing studies, mostly on rat models, to determine whether or not they can figure out what the glial cell migration is in through the brain that's causing an abnormality that ultimately turns out to be this disease. Nothing that I heard in the time out there led me to believe that at this point in time anybody is real close to anything, but at least there's ongoing studies and they're looking at things. The most interesting piece of fact that came out to me from the study, and is pertinent to what we're talking about today, is the effect of opioid narcotic medications on glial cell movement and brains. And the clear evidence, the clear, gigantic, mushroom cloud evidence is that if you take opioid pain medicine, it's going to block your ability to get better. Now, I'm going to repeat it. If you take opioid medication, it is going to block your ability to get better. This is clear statistical evidence. I mean, I looked at this and there was just no question when that data is published and available, when you look at it, you have to recognize that your best chance of feeling better is without opioid narcotic medications. This is a problem if I'm sitting on that side of the audience, because on the one hand I'm saying, okay, that's great, I don't want to take them. I didn't like them in the first place, I don't like the way I feel, I hate being constipated, my mouth is dry, my speech is up, I hate it. But I hate being in pain. And at least it gives me some temporary respite from my pain and allows me to function. So I'm going to take them because I can go out and go shopping, or maybe I can go to, to a movie with my family or something like that. Kind of being on this seesaw, going back and forth. And so again, we circle back to the same thing. Well, if you're not supposed to take opioid medications, if you don't want to take them because they're getting in the way on this end, what do you do for the pain? Everything comes back to the same thing. The source of the pain notwithstanding, there are people in this world, all over the world, and a lot of the stuff is Indian, Chinese medicine and stuff, who are taking care of pain without opioid narcotics. Every acupuncturist in the world that's treating some kind of pain is not giving that person Percocet when they walk out after the acupuncture treatment. They're doing acupuncture to take the pain away. Please remember that the human body, this wonderfully unique entity that we are, is meant to heal itself. If you give the body a chance, it will heal itself. Case in point, you sprain an ankle, if you stay off the ankle gets better. The swelling goes down, the pain goes away, everything gets better. That's the way the entire body is. When you get a cold or the flu, you can take drugs. They told me in medical school, if you give somebody medication, antibiotics for a cold, they will get better in 7 days. If you give them nothing, they'll get better in a week. It's tongue-in-cheek, but it's true. Okay? A viral infection goes away on its own. And in fact, most infections in a healthy human being will get better on their own. The only major exception being dental. Dental, you've got to intervene, and I'm not going to talk to you about dental because I don't know anything about that. dental infections other than I know a good dentist. So the point at hand is we keep circling back to the same thing. What are we missing? So I think there's two things. We have to identify. That's really important. We have to teach people how to identify. And then we have to find a better way to treat, because this one ain't working. So let me go back to identify for a minute. And those of you who have heard me speak before, those of you who may have heard some of the things that I recorded, will know that I am the hugest, if there is such a word, hugest proponent of thermal imaging, thermography, infrared imaging that you will ever meet in your life. Okay, I started doing thermography, which is infrared imaging, in 1982. I thought it was the second coming of chocolate. I thought this is a test that everybody's going to use. And like Dr. Sue said in the Lorax, that everybody needs. It is the only diagnostic test that will show you reflex sympathetic dystrophy. Only. Okay. Triple phase bone scans, QSD testing, only. Because number one, non-invasive, number two, non-contact, number three, no injections, number four, no claustrophobia, and number five, as we have proven over and over again, when I bring somebody in with that one-arm disease, I'm able to see where that disease is going to migrate before it even migrates. The problem with thermography, and this is not a thermography conference, the problem with thermography is that there's a lot of people out there who don't understand it, a lot of people who think it's not cutting-edge stuff, a lot of people that are jealous of it because they do triple phase bone scans and QSD testing. And I'm here to tell you that I've been doing this now since 1982, which is, it's 30 years next year. And I did it since 1982. Never seen a patient that I had a presumptive diagnosis of RSD that the thermogram didn't prove positive. Never seen one. And my participation in the conference in New Mexico was they invited me out there to talk to this assemblage of really intelligent laboratory-based PhDs about thermal imaging. And I heard day before yesterday that the federal government, secondhand, so this is what I'm telling you nobody else knows, except me and three other guys, the federal government deregulated certain tests and went to those facilities, those institutes that do testing and told them, look into using this test more because we believe it has the potential to be a big player in the diagnostic market in the years to come. And one of the tests they deregulated and gave that imprimatur to was thermal imaging and thermography. So now 30 years later, 50 years after it was introduced in this country, we may finally start to see it move forward. But make no mistake about it, if you're not sure if this disease diagnosis is correct, or if you know someone who's walking around with a constellation of symptoms and the doctors are wrong, you put them in front of a thermal imaging camera and you will see the changes in color that are consistent with sympathetic dysfunction, that are consistent with an RSD diagnosis. So diagnostically, for my money, anybody who has a question of the diagnosis should be in front of a thermal imaging camera. It's somewhat problematic. There's only about 400 of them in the country. But the point is, that's where you belong. Anybody who is going to put a spinal cord stimulator into a back for an arm or a leg should do it with thermal imaging guidance. Now, the gentleman in the back says he's got a stimulator. I'm going to tell you that I know what they did. They put you in this room, they gave you some medication, they made you a little bit drowsy, they made it important that you stay awake because they wanted to ask you questions. So how does it feel? What does it look like? Whatever. And they're probing around your back and your leg or your neck and your arm, whichever it happened to be. And when you said, yeah, that feels really good, they tied the thing in place and said that's where it's going to be. Okay. If you're a millimeter or two off in your idea, okay, you get that much less. And if you're 5 millimeters off, it doesn't work at all. Okay. And people who are half asleep tend to be half asleep. You ever wake up half asleep and you say, you know, what time is it, where am I, what am I doing? You get in that kind of vague state where you're not really sure that the comments that you're making are accurate. So you're giving somebody the opportunity to be inaccurate by giving the drug, and then you're asking them how they feel. I can take a thermal imaging camera, put it on the limb, watch the foot go from blue to pink to red, or whatever it happens to be, and say, I'm asleep. I don't need your input. I know when it's the right place. I spent the last 10 years trying to get the companies that do this to listen to me, and they're all just gone. So we're back to the model. Diagnostically, thermal imaging, the rest of it is only rule-outs. Okay, let's make sure you don't have a herniated disc. Let's make sure you don't have a spinal fracture. Let's make sure you don't have carpal tunnel syndrome, whatever it happens to be, because remember, you can have two things. You can have hypertension and diabetes, you can have RSD and a disc herniation. And it's nice to know what you're treating, so those other things will tell you what you have, but they will never tell you whether this is a reflex lymphatic dystrophy diagnosis. So thermal imaging, and thermal imaging are the best 3 tests that you can do. And I give you this information to pass along, please, to the rest of the people. If you've got somebody who says, my doctor told me that they don't know what's wrong with me, and I just can't get an answer, put them in front of the camera, because we will tell you based upon thermal imaging, yes or no. You're not going to walk out with I'm not sure, yes or no. There's a lot of technical reasons that don't belong here today. Therapeutically, the cutting edge stuff is ketamine. Ketamine is, at this point in time, the cutting edge of the treatment of reflex lymphatic dystrophy. We've done in my office about 100 people. 80% of those people, 80 or 85 of those people are better. Now, let's talk about better. Better means better quality of life, less pain, more activity, less drug, any number of those things. Better. Each and every one of those people that fits into better, okay, if you told them tomorrow you were taking it away, would fight you to the death to keep the ketamine because of the import that it is in their life. And I believe in my heart that ketamine is a wonderful, wonderful thing for acute. I told somebody at the conference the following story. If I were living out west and I had a whole bunch of horses and I decided there was one horse that I really would like to have, it's a wild horse, and I want to make that horse my own, I want to train that horse. But he's out running in the country fields. I've got to get that horse somewhere from out there into a corral. Because in a corral, I can break the horse, I can train the horse, I can teach the horse. I can't do it if he's running wild in his environment. There's too much room, I can't catch him. And even if I do, he's still on his own. I need to take control so that I'm in control of what's going on. And to me, ultimately, I believe that's going to be the role for ketamine. I'm going to take people who are out there and bring them in and get them to a place where the other things that we're going to do are going to work. Because the problem with ketamine right now, in addition to the fact that it is a psychotropic type drug, the problem with the ketamine is that you can't ever stop it. That may sound like, wow, what do you mean you can't ever stop it? And our original thought was, you know what, you don't ever stop insulin in a diabetic. So what's the big deal? And then I got smarter with help, and the smarter that I got was, wait a minute, if I take that diabetic and I put them on a diet, and I put them on an exercise program, and I really structure their eating habits the way I want them done in their exercise program, and if I put them on some supplements that make their pancreas work better, I can get them off the insulin. Well, if I can do that for the diabetic, which has always been my line of correlation, why can't I do it for this one over here who's on ketamine? Why can't I bring them in and put them on a diet and put them on an exercise program and give them nutritional supplements to make their nervous system work better, okay, and do all the same things and get them off the ketamine? And the answer is, I can. I can. Unfortunately, we're back to the same thing. The insurance industry will pay for the ketamine, but not for all this other stuff, but that's a separate issue. So I always use this correlation for the insurance company. Well, wait a minute, you're not stopping the ketamine. Well, no, but I'm not stopping the insulin either. And to that end, it's true. The fact of the matter is we can do that, but I can't do it when they're out there in the field. I got to bring them in. So to me, that role, the ketamine ultimately, I think, is going to be in an uncontrolled reflex, uncontrolled being the key word, uncontrolled RSD patient, the way to get them to a level of control where we can do this for a finite period of time, and then we can move into the other stuff. The other stuff being diet and exercise and this and that and the next thing. And there's so much to this. There's so much more to this. And I don't mean to infringe on Liesha's lecture that you'll hear, but I want to just talk about one thing. I sat down with my infusionist the other day and we talked about the 50 or 60 active patients in the ketamine infusion suite, and the only criteria that we were talking about, she and I, was mindset. Mindset. Which of those 50 or 60 people, okay, really were committed to getting better? Committed. The problem is that people say they want to get better, but there's a different level. You can sense the level of commitment in some people. And so we sat down and I had her make a list and I make a list, and we were doing it was kind of one of those word games, and I'm writing and she's writing, and when we finished, each one of us had about 20 people on the list. And of the 20 people, I think like 19 were the same people. There are people who just get up in the morning, okay, with the idea that they're going to be better. And there are other people who get up in the morning and say, I hope I'm better, or I want to be better, or I'm never going to be better, or why did God do this to me? Okay? And so one of the things that goes into this entirety of getting better is the top to bottom, total body, mind, spirit, everything, commitment to getting better. And I'm not talking to anybody, I'm not talking about anybody, but you can see it and you can hear it and you can feel it when you talk to people. I mean, I have people that come into that office who are never going to get better, no matter how much I talk to them, no matter how much I try, because their mind is someplace else. And one of the things that we've tried to correct is somebody comes in and says, my RSD flared up, and I said, it's not your RSD. It's the RSD flare up. Now, it's a subtle difference. It's a subtle, but it's a big difference inside. Mm-hmm. It's not yours. You didn't ask for it. You don't want it. It's there. Get rid of it. So, what we are learning, and if I look back at a lecture that I gave 5 years ago, maybe even less, I would have stood here and I would have told you all of the reasons why ketamine this and spinal cord stimulators that. And as I'm going along now, what I'm doing is I'm saying to people, yeah, I mean, all that has its place, like everything else. But there's more to it, and the real bottom line of knowing that there's more to it is that the percentage of people who are getting better enough to get back into their lives is too small for us to justify the fact that what we're doing is right, or at least completely right. And when we start doing ketamine, we get people up and they get off their pain pills and they throw away their walkers and walk in. This is great. I mean, I had a patient, honest to God, who, to get out of her wheelchair and onto a table, took 2 people. It took 2 people. Okay? And she went to Mexico, went into the coma part of ketamine, came back and literally almost did cartwheels in the office. I mean, literally almost was cartwheeling. She was off of her drugs. She was bright-eyed. She gained some of the weight that she lost. She was one of those people who went the other way. She was going back to work. She was becoming an advocate, and she was rip-roaring ready to go. Okay, divorced her husband, and a part of that because she thought he was dragging her down, changed her job, did all these other kind of things, cut her hair. I mean, all the things just started her life anew. And we stood back and said, this is great. And then a year later, she's in the office and she's kind of walking with a walker, and it says, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. And you get into talking to her and you realize that there's still a piece missing. You realize that there's still something that was missing, because what we did basically was, we gave her penicillin and her strep throat went away. Just went away for a year. But the analogy is about the same. What we did was we made her better, and we thought we had it right. We thought her mindset was right, we thought her diet was right, we thought her activity was right, and so we learned something from that. Okay. And I would have told you 2 or 3 years ago, if you get somebody better with the ketamine, that's great. Just keep giving them ketamine, they'll be good. But I'm smarter than I was. And I'm more perceptive than I was, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. And I'm smarter than I was for the simple reason that I have a wife who's a Reiki master and an alternative health practitioner who said to me, at least look at this stuff. Because that's what she does and that's what she reads. And I'm over here in the conventional medicine thing. And I say, yeah, I'll look at this stuff. And I listen to this stuff and I go, oh, you know what? Maybe this model that I've been following for 35 years is not altogether where I need to be. I don't necessarily know that I need to, but there's a place in the middle for me that works. Okay. Educationally, diagnostically, therapeutically, there's a place that works that we're missing. And I would venture to guess that everyone sitting in this office today who has this disease, or knows somebody, or is married to somebody, or cares about somebody, or whatever, is looking at somebody with disease, realizes that what I'm saying is resonating with you, either in its entirety or in part. And the reason that it is because I'm seeing you sit here with this little subtle nods of the head going, yep, he's got it, I understand. Because if you were all better from what was being done, you'd be Christmas shopping. You'd be sitting here listening to me. There's still a piece missing, or maybe lots of pieces missing. And they'll come, they will come, because we will find a way, and we will find somebody to come over and drop the necessary funds into. There's no lack of people who will participate. Listen, I'm in New Jersey. You guys are here in this part of Pennsylvania. How many of you would not get in a car and come to my office 3 days a week for a program that was cutting edge, that included X, Y, and Z, if all it cost you was the time and the gas and the toll money? Probably none of you. You'd all be there. We give you something that's going to make you better without the drugs, without this, without that. All you got to show up. The list is floor to ceiling. That's why you're here. That's why we have these meetings. Because people want to be better. And in order to make them better, we just haven't found the right way to get to where we want to be. So what I've done here today is, and what I plan to do at this point in time is give everybody 5 minutes to stretch. And then I'm going to tell you about Liesha and let her talk to you about the other side of what we do. And then the two of us, at the end of that, will answer any questions that you might have. And so just think about them, put them on a piece of paper, and we'll answer whatever. I did this when I came in today. I really wasn't sure. I'm never sure. For those of you who know me, I'm never sure which direction I'm going to go when I stand up here and open my mouth, because it changes like from the back of the room to the front. But I think it's really important for those of you who came out on this kind of cold day when you could be doing something else to know that the stuff that you're reading in the books and the stuff that you're reading online and the blogs that you're reading and the chat rooms that you're in are all really kind of here. And it's time for us to start getting outside that box. It's time for us to do that. This lecture is going to go on some website or YouTube or whatever, and it will get out. And as it will, we'll start our own little movement, our own little idea of doing really more than the conventional stuff. And I think maybe next year at this time, if we're able to do some of the things, and you're able to do some of the things, there are people who are going to stand up and say, you know what, I'm no longer on the narcotics. I'm no longer taking that. I was able to do this, I was able to do that. I'm moving in a positive direction. I'm moving in a positive direction because we're doing something that's outside the box. What's really outside the box has really been there for years and years and years and years. You look at ancient Chinese medicine, it's around 5,000 years, and the Americans aren't paying any attention to it. It works. Look at the American Indian stuff. They know stuff that they're still laughing at us at the stuff that they never gave us. They're fixing their own, okay? But they know they've got these potions and stuff. It's out there. All you have to do is find it and implement it and get away from that narrow-minded thinking that you have to take this to get to that point, because it really simply isn't true. Okay? So let's take 5 minutes, stretch yourself out, and then we'll come back and do